Hello and most welcome to 1234 of the Heidegger series. I would have liked to make some notes on the whiteboard here, but all the pens are gone, and I think that's rather typical for the University Library here in Gothenburg. It's never any provisions for fresh pens. I think the reason being that writing is the expression of thinking and not a thing appreciated. Thinking should be transcendental, non-observable, non-visible, non-material. It should be something mental purely and not strictly something understandable by others. Something that definitely goes against that is Martin Heidegger, who puts his foot down to defend thinking, to defend what it is to be a human being, I would say, to defend the values in life, and to let one's voice be strong, not weak, ephemeral, or transcendental, as I would say it is now, in this closeness of the mind. This is the book by Martin Heidegger and Eugene Fink, and it's the Heidegger Seminars. I will jump directly into it. Just mention it is taken from the Winter Seminar of 1966-67. It's actually my birth year at the University of Freiburg, so it makes it even more interesting to dwell into. And it was mutually organized by Martin Heidegger and Eugene Fink. Chapter 1, Mode of Procedure, beginning with fragment 64. Fink, I opened the seminar with hearty thanks to Professor Heidegger for his readiness to assume spiritual leadership in our common attempt to advance into the area of the great and historically important thinker, Heraclitus. Heraclitus's voice, like that of Python, reaches us over 1,000 years. Although this thinker lived at the origin of the West, and to that extent is longest past, we have not overtaken him even now. From Martin Heidegger's dialogue with the Greeks, in many of his writings, we can learn how the furthest becomes near and the most familiar becomes strange, and how we remain restless and are unable to rely on a sure interpretation of the Greeks. For us, the Greeks signify an enormous challenge. Our seminar should be an exercise in thinking, that is, in reflection on the thoughts anticipated by Heraclitus. Confronted with his text, left to us only as fragments, we are not so much concerned with the philological problematic, as important as it might be, as with advancing into the matter itself, that is, toward the matter that must have stood before Heraclitus's spiritual you. This matter is not simply on hand like a result or like some spoken tradition. Rather, it can be opened up or blocked from view precisely through the spoken tradition. It is not correct to view the matter of philosophy, particularly the matter of thinking, as Martin Heidegger has formulated it, as a product laying before us. The matter of thinking does not lie somewhere before us like a land of truth into which one can advance. It is not a thing that we can discover and uncover. The reality of and the appropriate manner of access to the matter of thinking is still dark for us. We are still seeking the matter of thinking of the thinker Heraclitus. And we are therefore a little like the poor man who has forgotten where the roads lead. Our seminar is not concerned with a spectacular business. It is concerned, however, with serious-minded work. Our common attempt at reflection will not be free from certain disappointments and defeats. Nevertheless, reading the text of the ancient thinker, we make the attempt to come into the spiritual movement that releases us to the matter that merits being named the matter of thinking. Professor Heidegger is in agreement that I should first advance a preliminary interpretation of the sayings of Heraclitus. This interpretation will give our discussion a basis and a starting place for a critical surpassing or even destruction. It will enable us to establish a certain common ground appropriate to inquiring discourse. Perhaps a preview of the particular language of Heraclitus's sayings is premature, before we have read and interpreted them individually. The language of Heraclitus has an inner ambiguity and multidimensionality, so that we cannot give it any unambiguous reference. It moves from the gnomic, sentential, and ambiguous sounding expressions to an extreme flight of thought. As an assigned text in our seminar, we will work with Fragment der Vorsokratiker by Herman Diels. For our part, we choose another arrangement. This should cast light on an inner coherence of the fragment's meaning, but without pretending to reconstruct the original form of Heraclitus's lost writing. Perithesios, we should attempt to trace a thread throughout the multiplicity of his sayings, in hope that a certain track can thereby show itself. Whether our arrangement of the fragments is better than the adopted by Diels is a question that should remain unsettled. Without further preliminary considerations, we shall proceed directly to the midst of the matter, beginning our interpretation with fragment 64. Ta de panda iashize Heranos. This sentence is clearly intelligible to everyone in what it appears to mean. Whether it is also intelligible in what this meaning concerns, however, is another question. But first, we ask what this sentence means. As soon as we reflect on it somewhat more, we immediately depart from the easy intelligibility and apparent familiarity of the sentence. Diels' translation reads, lightning steers the universe. But is universe the fitting translation of Tapanda. After due deliberation, one can indeed come to equate Tapanda and universe. But first of all, Tapanda means everything. And signifies all things, all of what is. Heraclitus speaks of Tapanda vis-à-vis Keravnos. In so doing, he enunciates a connection between many things and the one enlightening. In the lightning bolt the many, in the sense of everything. Flash up, whereby everything is plural. If we first ask naively about Tapanda, we are dealing with a quintessential relatedness. If we translate Tapanda as all things, we must first ask what kinds of things there are. At the outset, we choose the way of a certain tactical naivete. On the one hand, we take the concept of a thing in a wider sense. And then we mean all that is. On the other hand, we also use it in a narrower sense. If we mean things in a narrower sense, then we can distinguish between such things as are from nature, physionda, and such as are the product of human techniques, onda, technionda, with all the things of nature, with the inanimate, like stone, and with the living, like plant, beast, and human. We mean only such things as are individuated and have determinate outlines. We have in view the determinate individual thing, to be sure, also has a particular common character in itself as being of a certain kind. We make the tacit assumption that tapanda, in the sense of the many in entirety, forms the entirety of finite, bounded things. The stone, for example, is part of a mountain. We can also speak of the mountain as of a thing. Or is it only a linguistic convention to call what has a determinate outline a thing? The stone is found as a rubble on the mountain. The mountain belongs in the mountain range, the latter on the earth's crust, and the earth itself as a great thing that belongs as a gravitational center in our solar system. So first reply from Heidegger. To begin, wouldn't it perhaps be appropriate to ask whether Heraclitus also speak of tapanda in other fragments, in order to have a specific clue from him about what he understands by tapanda. In this way we get closer to Heraclitus. That is one question. The second question I would like to put under discussion is what lightning has to do with tapanda. We must ask concretely what it can mean when Heraclitus says that lightning steers tapanda. Can lightning steer the universe at all? Participant. If we begin by taking lightning only as a phenomenon, then we must wonder that it should steer the universe, since lightning as a phenomenal entity as a sensuously perceptible luminous appearance still belongs together with all the other entities in the universe. Heidegger, we must bring lightning into connection with the phenomenon of nature if we wish to understand it in Greek. Think. Lightning regarded as a phenomenon of nature means the outbreak of the shining lightning flash in the dark of night. Just as lightning in the night momentarily flashes up, and in the brightness of the gleam shows that things in their articulated outline, so lightning in a deeper sense brings to light the multiple things in their articulated gathering. Heidegger, I remember an afternoon during my journey in the Aegina. Suddenly, I saw a single bolt of lightning, after which no more followed. My thought was Zeus. Our task now consists in looking with Heraclitus for what tapanda means. It is an open question how far a distinction was already possible with him between everything in the sense of the sum of individuals and everything in the meaning of embracing allness. The other task, which is first posed for us by fragment 64, is the connection between tapanda and lightning. We must also bring Heraclitus's lightning into connection with fire, pyr. It is also essential to observe who has handed fragment 64 down to us. It is the church father Hippolytus, who died roughly AD 236 or 37. From Heraclitus's time, approximately 800 years passed before our fragment is cited by Hippolytus. In this context, pyr and cosmos are also mentioned, but we do not wish to enter here into the philological problematic that emerges in view of the connection of the fragment and the context of Hippolytus. Once more, Heraclitus points out that many and one are enforcing each other, and think about the lightning. Think of it as illuminating a multitude. One single lightning, as Heidegger says, illuminating tapanda, everything, or the multitude. Everything coming out of one, but also everything being one. I think of it as when a lightning strikes, the lightning and what it shows is simultaneously, absolutely simultaneously. I think that is a hint to the most important multitude and singularity being complementary. In a conversation, to continue, that I held with Karl Reinhardt in 1941, when he stayed here in Freiburg, I spoke to him about the middle ground between pure philology, which intends to find the real Heraclitus, with its philological tools, and the kind of philosophizing that consists in thinking without discipline and thereby assuming too much. Between these two extremes, there is a middle ground concerned with the role of the transmission of understanding, of sense as well as interpretation. With Hippolytus, we find not only pir, but also ekpirosis, conflagration, which for him has the meaning of the end of the world. If we now ask what tapanda, lightning, and also steering mean in fragment 64, we must at the same time attempt to transfer ourselves into the Greek world with the clarification of these words, so that we can understand fragment 64 in a genuine manner. I would propose that fragment 41 be added to it. Ine gar ento sophon epistasfa inominin oten oti ekiveri ekivirisi panda dia pandon. Peels translates, the wise is one thing only, to understand the thoughts that steer everything, through everything. Literally translated, panda dia pandon means everything throughout everything. The importance of this saying lies, on the one hand, in ento sophon. The wise is one thing only, and on the other, panda dia pandon. Here above, we must take into the view the connection of the beginning and the end of the sentence. Think, there is a similar connection on the one hand between the oneness of the lightning flash in the brightness of which the many show themselves in their outline, their articulation, antapanda, and on the other, between the oneness of sophon and pandadia pandon. As Kerabnos relates to tapanda, entosophon relates analogously to pandadia pandon. I certainly grant that lightning and the entosophon stand in relation to one another. But there is still more to notice in fragment 41. In fragment 64, Heraclitus speaks of tapanda. In fragment 41, of panda via pandon. In Parmenides 1 through 32, we also find a similar phrase. Diapandos panda perodda. In the phrase panda dia pandun, the meaning of dia is above all to be questioned. To begin, it means throughout. But how should we understand throughout? Topographically, spatially, causally, or how else. In fragment 64, tapanda does not mean a calm, static multiplicity, but rather a dynamic multiplicity of entities. In tapanda, a kind of movement is thought precisely in the reference back to lightning. In the brightness, specifically the clearing, which the lightning bolts tears open, tapanda flash up and stop into appearance. The being moved of tapanda is also thought in the lightening up of entities, in the clearing of lightning. Heidegger, at first, let us leave aside words like clearing and brightness. Think, if I have spoken of moment, we must distinguish on the one hand between the movement that lies in the lighting of lightning, in the outbreak of brightness, and on the other hand, the movement in tapanda, in things. The movement of brightness, of lightning, corresponds to the movement that goes out from the ento sophon and continues on in the many things in entirety. Things are not blocks at rest, rather they are diversified in movement. Clearly this shows that movement and stillness are complementary, as is singularity and plurality. In being able to show singularity, we need plurality. Otherwise, no singularity will show itself. And I think that is particularly clear in the metaphor of the lightning, so well put by Heidegger on his trip on the Aegean. And I always think of this enormous confusion in this very place of monosemism. The idea that the word or words have only one meaning is that person's lack of understanding meaning. Not being able to express him or herself, to herself or himself, nor to others. And this angst or pain is expressed as monosemism. It's an adjunct, a supplement, to use a Derridian expression, to have alleviate the pain of not being able to speak and think and to understand. It's a personal thing above all. Heraclitus shows that by admitting everything, tapanda, we also get the distinctiveness of the lightning bolt that clearly shows something which is not dim-lighted, obtuse or obscure. Monosemists are incredibly obscure, unclear and dim. They lack clarity. Their words do not bring meanings. It could also be a non-referential language, a language that doesn't refer to anything. And of course, the anguish of that must be incredibly intense, beyond belief. The closing of intellectuality is a personal business as well as a societal business. It does not affect society alone. It affects each singular individual. So, a little comment from me here. Tapanda are thus not a whole, present in front of us, but entities in movement. On the other hand, movement does not occur as kinesis in Heraclitus, or kinesis, sorry, it's a K. Think if movement does not also belong among the fundamental words in Heraclitus, it is still always stands in the horizon of problems of his thinking. Heidegger, two fragments 64 and 41. We now add fragment 1. Tude logon tud, eontos ai exineti ginonda. It's too long to read. At first only ginomenon, gar pandon, kataton, logon, tonde, interests us. We translate, for although everything happens according to this logos, if Heraclitus speaks here of ginomenon coming into being, he is nevertheless talking about movement. In ginomenon gar pandon, coming into being of everything. We are dealing with the things being moved within the cosmos and not with the movement that issues from logos. Heidegger, Genomenon belongs to Genesis. When the Bible speaks of Genesis, it means that this, the creation, in which things are brought into existence. But what does Genesis signify in Greek? Participant. Genesis is also no concept in Heraclitus. Heidegger, since when do we have concepts at all? Participant, only since Plato and Aristotle. We even have the first philosophical dictionary with Aristotle. While Plato manages to deal with concepts only with difficulty, we see that Aristotle deals with them more easily. The word genomenon stands in a fundamental place in fragment 1. Fink. Perhaps we can add a comment to our discussion. We find genesis in an easily understood sense. With living beings phenomenally seen. Plants spring up from seeds, beasts from the pairing of parents, and humans from the sexual union between man and woman. Genesis is also native to the phenomenal region of our vegetative animal. Coming into existence, Gignesva in this region is at the same time coupled with passing away. Feresve seem to be misspelled. Phi theta, is that possible? If we now, must be if we now refer genesis also to the region of lifeless things, so we continue. If we now I'm going to restart a bit here. If we now refer genesis also to the region of lifeless things, we operate with an expanded, more general sense of this word. For if we refer genesis to tapanda, we expand the sense of genesis, beyond the phenomenal region in which the Genesis phenomenon is otherwise at home. Heidegger, what you understand by the phenomenal sense of the word genesis, we can also label as ontic. Fink. We also meet the widening of the original phenomenal meaning of genesis in common language. For example, when we speak of the worlds coming into existence, we use specific images and domains of ideas in our representations. With ginomenon in fragment 1, we are concerned with a more general sense of genesis. For tapanda does not come into existence like that entity which comes into existence in accordance with genesis. In the narrower sense, it is also not like living beings. It is another matter when, in the coming into existence of things, manufacture and production, technique, poiosis are also meant. The poiosis of phenomena is, however, something other than genesis. The jug does not come into existence by means of the potter's hand like the man is begotten by parents. Heidegger, let us once again clarify for ourselves what our task is. We ask, what does tapanda mean in fragment 64 and panda dia pandon in fragment 41? And ginomenon gar pandon in fragment 1. Kata ton logon, according to the logos, in fragment 1 corresponds with the entosophon in fragment 41 and ke ravnon in fragment 64. Fink, in ginomenon, the sense of genesis is used in a wider manner. Heidegger, oops. to this. Heidegger, but can one actually speak of widening here? I mean that we should try to understand steering, everything throughout everything, and now the movement that is fought in ginomenon in a genuine Greek sense. I agree that we may not take the meaning of Genesis in ginomenon narrowly. Rather, it is here a matter of general expression. Fragment 1 is considered to be the beginning of Heraclitus's writing. Something fundamental is said in it. But may we now refer ginomenon, thought in Genesis in a wide sense, to coming forth, herforkommen. In anticipation, we can say that we must keep in the view the fundamental trait of what the Greeks called being. Although I do not like to use this word anymore, we now take it up nevertheless. When Heraclitus thinks genesis in ginomenon, he does not mean becoming in the modern sense. That is, he doesn't mean it as a process. But thought in Greek, genesis, means to come into being, to come forth in presence. We now have 3 different concerns drawn out of fragments 64, 41 and 1, to which we must hold ourselves if we wish to come up into a clear concerning tapanda. Let us also draw on fragment 50. Och emon alla to logon a ko sandas. omolegin sophon estin en panda enai. Deal's translation runs, listening not to me, but to the Logos. It is wise to say that everything is one. Before all else, this saying centers on en, panda, and homologin. I think a comment is in place here, and the comment here is obviously that once more Heraclitus and Heidegger and Fink are pointing to how singularity, distinctiveness, but also identity and rationality is coming from the plurality. And to make an example here, when I finally got the title, I found some pens. In the closing of modern thinking, the closing is literal. We cut off parts of the wholeness or what presents itself. What is coming out of the lightning bolt? In modern day universities, not before, handwriting is cut off. So if we have the wholeness, this is cut off, then we cut off good pens, camaraderie, eating, body. We cut off the environment. We are isolated here. There are no pubs, no restaurants, in very sharp contradistinction to old universities. And it becomes narrower and narrower and narrower and less satisfying, because we immediately feel the effect of this cutting off. We lose clearness, but also generality. We lose the all and we lose the one. We can only have distinctiveness in polysemy. We will not be able to bring meaning to the front. Let it be without plurality. It is not an ideology, polysemy. It is the bringing forth of either a singular meaning, a clearness, a distinctiveness, or a universal saying that could only be possible if the parts are let to be together. Tapanda, all, or holon. It is like chopping off one's own limbs. And I would say that in a quite literal sense. Walk around these areas and you see people trying to destroy their own bodies with horrible effects. But it's also, I would say, the most horrible victim is thinking itself. The body takes decades, maybe, to be broken, but the mind directly, within months, it is paying the price. And in this anguish that you devolve and develop the pain, you start to become sharp, bitter, too hard, fixated, and that is when you start to shout monosemic and put water on the bolting light. Extinguish it. And this is, of course, something that Heraclitus meant in another phrase. It is when the salt dissolves in the water, it disappears, it becomes smaller, it dissolves. This is the softening of the soul and body. I would say, in my personal comment, that softening of the body soul, this metaphor of water dissolving into the sea, or salt dissolving into the sea, is the opposite of immortality. This is mortality. And that mortality, death, can only come in life, while we're still chopping around. I would say Heraclitus is pointing to immortality, but that is my view. I'll continue. Think, if we now start out from coming forth to appearance, zum Vorschein kommen, wherein you see the Greek meaning of ginomenon as thought in genesis. Then we also have a reference to the brightness and gleam of lightning, in which the individual thing stands and flashes up. Then we would have the following analogical correlation. As lightning on a dark night lets us see everything individual in its specific outline all at once. So this would be in a short time span the same as that which happened perpetually in pir aezonon, ever living fire, in fragment 30. The entry of entities in their determinatedness is thought in the moment of brightness. Out of fragment 64 comes tapanda, out of fragment 41 comes panda dia pandon. And out of fragment 1, ginomenon pandon kataton logon. Earlier we tried to discern the movement of lightning in the lightning bolt. Now we can say that it is the movement of bringing forth to appearance. But bringing forth to appearance which lightning accomplishes in entities is also a steering intervention in the moving of things themselves. Things are moved in the manner of advancing and receding. waxing and waning, of local movement and alteration. The movement of lightning corresponds to the moving of the entosophon. The steering movement is not thought with respect to the lightning or with respect to entosophon. But with respect to the efficacy of the lightning of entosophon, which affects bringing forth to appearance and continues to affect things. The movement of steering intervention in the moving of things happens in accord with the logos. The movement of things that stand in the brightness of lightning has a wisdom-like nature that must, however, be distinguished from the movement that issues itself from sophon. Fragment 41 does not concern itself only with the relatedness of the one and the many that appear in the one, but also with the efficacy of the one in the reference to tapanda, which comes to expression tanda dia pandon. It could be that logos in fragment 1 is another word for sophon in fragment 41. For keravnos in fragment 64, as well as for pir, polemos. Polemos is the pandon basileus, the king of everything. The war that determines the antithetical movement of things that stand in the sphere of appearance. So one could comment this: we are just at this place in this building looking at the truth after the fact, after the lightning struck, and we have to do with just truth, not the appearance or the coming forth. The truth is a looking on at without being there really, and it's a shadow, I would say quite literally, lacking the light but also lacking what the light shines on. It's lacking in both at the same time. I call it a shadow, it's maybe not the best word, but it's lacking in both. And this shadow is the truth here at the closing. When we have closed, we only have the truth, and each one has its own truth. And I don't have to mention private language here, how it shows that to be an impossibility. It leads to a pain, leads to a tension, and in that torturous life, truth becomes something you cling to. You no longer have the livid, vivid, bolting light showing existence so it can come forth to you, be lively for you, be something for you. At the same time, you come alive, both at the same time. Here we're lacking in both. We just have the stale truth. We are no longer entities or individuals, and the world around us are no longer objects. They are unmoving, a trait an object never has. An object is never unmoving. It is movement and stillness. Continue here. Heidegger, I should mention, on page 9. Do you wish to say that what is meant by kinesis in kinemonon garpandon serves to determine more closely the dia of fragment 41? Do you then understand dia causally? In 2. Fink, in no way. I would only like to say that lightning, which tears open the dark of night, and in its gleam lights up and lets all individual things be seen. At the same time, it is also the mobile power of genesis in the manner of dia. And that this movement passes into the movement of things. Like the lightning, the logos of fragment 1 also relates to tapanda. The movement of logos, which brings forth and establishes, steers and determines everything, corresponds to the lightning movement that brings forth. Participant. The relationship of the lightning movement and the movement of entities is no relationship of effect. When it was said that the lightning movement that brings forth to appearance passes into the movement of things, no causal relationship is intended between the movement that brings forth and the movement of what is brought forth. 2 movements. Rather, that which stands here in the problem horizon is the difference between movement in being and movement in entities, specifically between movement in unconcealing and movement in what is unconcealed. Fink, we distinguish the lightning outbreak of light as movement of bringing forth, and the coming forth in it of every specific entity in its movement. The instantaneousness of lightning is an indication of an impermanence. We must understand lightning as the briefest time, precisely as the instantaneous that is a symbol for the movement of bringing forth, not itself in time, but allowing time. Heidegger, isn't lightning eternal and not merely momentarily? Fink, the problem of movement that brings forth in its relationship to the movement of what is brought forth. We must think in the nexus of lightning, sun, fire, also the seasons in which time is thought. The fiery with Heraclitus must be thought in more aspects. For example, the fire in the sun and the transformations of fire, pyros, tropai, fire which underlies everything, is the bringing forth that withdraws itself. In its transformations as that which is brought forth, I would like to bring Panda dia Pandon in fragments 41 into connection with the pyros tropai. Lighting is the sudden burst of light in the dark of night. If now the lightning is perpetual, it is a symbol for the movement of bringing forth. Heidegger, are you opposed to an identification of lightning, fire, and also war? No, but the identification here is one of identity and non-identity. Very important. Heidegger, we must then understand identity as belonging together. Fink, lightning, fire, sun, war, logos, sophon are different lines of thinking on one and the same ground. In pyros tropai. The ground is thought, which changes itself over, shifts into water and earth. I make a comment there. I'll put an incredibly small spot here. It is very, very small. No one will ever notice. You might come a little bit closer here. See it this way, that there is a movement here. And all these lines are how they move and slowly uncover, bit by bit, identity. So there is a movement that gives cause to the stillness and identity also. Whereas if you're not in on the movement, you don't have the stillness. And I call this line the monosemic line. It's an individual who's not in on it. He cannot catch the movement. He tried to fixate meaning, being constantly out of sync. Here comes this, I stop it here, but that person is going to be 1 second after the instantaneous bolt of light. Nothing gets revealed. Both observer and observed are not present. Presence can only be in the movement. You are behind and you claim monosemism. One way that, for instance, in more modern writings and talks of trying to cure that from the monosemism place is to try to capture it by giving it new names constantly. When I studied at the university, it was a constant trying to figure the meaning, trying to redefine or recapture, trying to grab it. And I think this is a very good metaphor. Once you're out of sync, your posture is down, you try to capture it. And the more you're lacking reality and realness of yourself, it's a thing that we know for a fact, it's present in modern time. I think Hari Uvari so eloquently and clearly points to the lack of identity of oneself and the lack of reality of the outer world. I think in some big research done in the UK, 40% of young people in the age of 15 to 18 didn't feel reality of the world, neither a reality of their own selves. This is when you claim monosemism, when you lost your meaning. Heraclitus was pointing to another direction, a positive direction, where you didn't go in the opposite direction of the movement, so to say, but instead you follow this movement even more. This is what I think makes Heraclitus such a grand philosopher, because he shows an opening, a development of the individual to be whole, holon, healthy, body and soul. I always thought it been completely obvious that monosemism is a symptom. And I remember my professors being desperate and even one crying when he was drunk. And I think that is always the case these days. It is thinking somehow, another way of explaining it is coming from Edward de Bono. Almost all academia think that logic is what creates novelty, understanding. Logic comes after. Can you compare this to the monosemism trying to fixate being one step behind after the lightning bolt? And this is also similar to making do with shrapnels or leftovers. You come to the grand dinner party, the party at the Blue Hall at 10th of December. You come on the 11th of December, the day after the Nobel Prize celebration, and you try to find food under the chair. This is monosemism. It's an utmost impoverished state, try to grab, and therefore you fixate your bone, you fixate your body, trying to clasp, and you sharpen your eyes, and you make still objects, so to speak. Now this is a movement, and from the perspective of monosemism, you cannot step into the same river twice. For them it seems like a defeat, or that you cannot have a permanent world. Oh no, just the opposite. It's only here where you lose permanence, eternity, and understanding. It is not a negative saying, you can never step into the same river twice. It's a positive. It means that there is a chance of being in the lightning, of experience and really understanding. He points to sophon, knowledge. Is a big contrast to the closing of the intellectuality. And being in the monosemic means that you have to reinvent yourself. It is like a fashion that changes every 4th year. And I remember this keenly when I studied linguistics. Someone said, or the professor, well, that's an old theory. It's at least 5 years old. And thereby it has to be remodeled, remade. And you get this feeling that that knowledge never lasted long. It had like milk, best before date, and if you try to pour it after that date, you will have these horrible clumps in the milk. It is like the truth I teach today almost will be gone tomorrow. Thereby I give less energy to what I'm saying now, what I'm thinking now, so to speak. It's already untrue what I'm saying, because it's going to be untrue tomorrow. I think this is very similar to what you find in classical physics in a very abstract way, that there is no development, no time, because the future has in some determined way already happened. It's also similar to this. It's also clearly showing that the futility is not only in the world, it is in the individual. And he or she try even harder to show that there is no truth, there can be no knowledge, as I so often heard. It's just perspective. And that's why I think postmodernism is not an ideology as such. Postmodernism is a state of, it's a modus, it's a Stimmung, not being, and it cannot be debated, because that person is going to remain in this state. This is how or she perceives the world. That's why I think Heraclitus is so called for, and why Heraclitus also goes so nicely together with quantum mechanics. The both showing to a greater permanent reality and knowledge of it. Because there's no doubt that the Newtonian model cannot lead to knowledge. It's the going away from the knowing. It's trying to go the other way, away from understanding, away from permanence, and being in a constant state of irritation, friction, lack of understanding. And no, I would say no state can be more torturous than the lack of understanding, of knowing. And Heraclitus is a great healer. He is a modern day, what you say, guru, but he's a true guru. He's a true shower of this fantastic world and how we can get back to knowing and go even further, which I think is very important. Go even further. I think without Heraclitus, the best we can opt for is have what we used to have. I think something that from the closing of the American Mind was the only option. And I would say also Jordan Peterson, Steven Pinker, I hope those names are familiar, tried to sort of go back to the rationality 100 years ago. And I think Jordan Peterson said you can train yourself to be how people used to be. Well, this is so much better. It's like saying to a football team, we were very good 4 years ago and I need you to think how that was so we can go back to that. Why don't step forward instead? What's wrong with this world when people say we need to go back? Not only is it impossible, it's not a very hopeful thing to think of. Christmas is coming up now. It's like saying to a child, well, let's go back to the last year's Christmas. Gonna put all the gifts in new parcels and put nice strings on them, and we reinvent what was the Christmas of 2021. I don't think any child would be happy with that. I think it was interesting. Very happy with this book. Thank you very much, and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye for now.